Welcome back, everyone. In this video, I am going to show you how to use lists and tuples in Python. Now, lists in Python are the same thing as arrays in C++ or Java. They do use indexes starting with the number 0, just like C++ and Java arrays do. So lists in Python use indexes to access each element, and indexes always start with the number 0. Lists in Python are also what we call mutable. That means you can change them after you've defined them. You can add more elements. You can change the elements within the list. They're also ordered. That means they're restricted to a certain order. That means the first element is always index 0, second element's index 1, and so on. Now, one way you could create a list in Python is this line right here. There it is. This line right here, where you could say my list is equal to these 5 elements. Lists must be enclosed in square brackets. However, here's one neat thing about Python. Python does not require that all elements of the list be of the same type. So here I have a second list called my other list. And as you can see, this list contains a string and then a floating point or double value, and then another string and then an integer value. You've got 3 different types of data within the same list, but Python has no problem with it. That is perfectly fine. Now, there are 2 ways you can print a list. I have this block of code where I'm going to print my list, the first one with the numbers in it. Here I'm going to print each element by using its index. So here I've set up a for loop. My loop variable is index, and I'm going to use the range function. Notice I start with 0, that is the first index, and then the last part of the range function is this len function, that's L-E-N, which is short for length. Every list has a built-in len function that gives you back the length, or the number of elements in the list. But as you may recall, since the first index is 0, and the list named my list has 5 elements, that means the index of the last element is 4. In other words, the index of the last element is always the length minus 1. That's where the range function works. So this range function will start at 0, but then go to the length minus 1, not to the length. And then here inside the for loop, I just have a print statement to print each individual element of this list. And so when I run this, here's my output. So here is the output for my list. There they are. Now, as far as the other list goes, here's where I'm going to print out that list, the my other list. Notice I have a for loop, but I'm not going to use indexes this time. It says for data in my other list. You have an in statement that allows you to go through each individual element of the list and not use indexes at all. That way you don't get an out of bounds error. You'll never have to worry about putting in an index that's too big. And here I'm just going to print the value of the variable data. My loop variable is data. That will take on the value of each element of my other list. And when I run that, there is the output. There are the elements of my other list. Now, there are many other built-in functions besides len that are used with lists. I strongly recommend you go to the Gaddis folder that is inside the PowerPoints folder in the files area of Canvas and look at the Chapter 7 PowerPoint slides. Those will give you a lot more information about what to do with lists, functions that other built-in functions you can use, and also an idea called slicing, where you can retrieve a portion of a list, like return a sub list, if you will. Chapter 8 is also good to look to in the Gaddis PowerPoint slides, but that deals mostly with strings. Chapter 7 is for any list with any types of elements in it. The next thing I'll talk about in this video is a concept called tuples. Tuples are also sequences that use indexes, just like a list does. And they are ordered just like a list. The indexes start at 0, so the index of the first element of a tuple is always 0, and the index of the last element of a tuple is always its length minus 1. However, unlike a list, tuples are immutable. That means once you set up a tuple, you cannot change it. It is going to stay that way all the way through. So here I've set up a tuple called tuple1, and I'm going to use indexes to display each element of this tuple. Now, each element of this particular tuple is a string, but just like a list, elements don't have to be strings, and tuples can take on elements of different types. You can have both floating point and integer and string as elements of a single tuple. And as you can see when I run this loop, so I'm using index as my loop variable, and that will be the index of each element. And there is the output of that loop. But then I have a second tuple right here called tuple2. As you can see, this one says tuples are not mutable. And as you can see, I'm using a for loop for that. There is my loop variable data. But notice in this second for loop, in the red box, I'm not using indexes. The loop variable data will represent each element of tuple 2 and just print it. And that output is right here. By the way, when you define a tuple in Python, as you can see here, you put the elements inside parentheses. So for a list, you put the elements inside square brackets. For a tuple, you put the elements inside parentheses. Once again, the Chapter 7 PowerPoint slides in the Gaddis folder will give you more information you need to know about tuples. An important thing about tuples is there are some of the methods that work for lists that also work for tuples, some of the built-in methods. However, there are some built-in methods that work for lists that will not work for tuples because tuples are immutable. All right, that is your introduction to lists and tuples. If you have any questions, please send me an email at kmuldrow@lbcc.edu.